Talk About It, a podcast exploring the opioid epidemic. Brought to you by The Cause. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, world. My name is Jacob Don, and you are listening to Talk About It, a show that dives deep into the opioid epidemic to uncover stories of hope and resilience. Today, I'm joined by Derrick Turner, a peer educator who is also a certified peer recovery specialist, who will be walking us through the connection between recovery, opioids, and the various treatment and assistance programs that he has been a part of. Derrick, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it. I'm really excited to dive right into this. How are you doing today?
Oh man, doing good and honored to be here, man. We're going to have some fun. You know, recovery can be a bit of a tough topic, but like I tell my students and I used to tell my clients, it doesn't mean you can't have fun. So that's what I'm about, is having fun.
Absolutely. For our viewers at home, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, just to kind of establish a baseline here?
All right. So, I told you my name was Derrick Turner. I've been a certified peer recovery specialist now for almost 3 years. Kind of got my start working in MAT facilities down here in Sussex. Got started at Cora's Wellness when I first became a peer, and got lucky enough to take certification, end up finding a job as a peer educator for the Mental Health Association, and been a peer educator now for almost 3.5 years, 3 years. So it's just been a joy. I love what I do. I love peer work. Outside of that, I'm a huge anime fan. I love music. Most folks know me as a drummer. Most of the time you'll always see me with my drumsticks, and I've got 4 dogs. Just moved my daughter into college, so I'm a lot older than people think at first.
I think it's safe to say, looking at your overall resume when it comes to recovery and prevention and peer support, it's very impressive. And I want to kind of dive right in and kind of touch on several points, kicking off with medication-assisted treatment. I'm personally not too familiar with medication-assisted treatment, or MAT, and for our viewers at home, they may not be familiar with what exactly that entails. So could you please tell us, what is MAT and what kind of medication does it involve, and what is the overall process regarding that?
So, depending on the type of treatment that you're getting, medication-assisted treatment can be anything from help from opioid addiction to alcohol. What's really wild is a lot of people don't really realize how common medication-assisted treatment is. If you're old enough to remember, quit the nicotine patches, for example, those can be a form of medication-assisted treatment because they're helping you quit an addiction. What I love most about the clinic that I worked at, we specialized in heroin addiction and alcohol, which is one of our biggest problems down in Sussex. And some of the medications that you might find, depending on what your treatment plan is and what you prefer, you could go the methadone route, which is what most people are more familiar with. But they also have other medications like Subutex and Suboxone as well, that also help manage and mitigate your addictions, because that's really all of what medication assisted treatment is helping you, basically, like, trying to think of the best way to say it. It helps you guard against cravings in the simplest form. So like when you take a dose of methadone, it actually acts as a blocker to help fight against those urges to want heroin. So that's why, like, you can actually learn to take it just as simple as you do an aspirin regimen every day as well. It's way more common than people think.
So I'm just curious, I'm sure medication-assisted treatment is just one of several different strategies or avenues towards recovery. Could you walk us through some others that you have experience with and that you might lead someone who has substance use or substance abuse disorder to, if they seek to be recovered from their issue?
One of the things that we realize is that recovery is on a spectrum. You know what I mean? And we try to figure out the best course of treatment for how far you are on the spectrum. So if you're on more the severe side of like severe heavy addiction, then yes, outpatient facilities, even more immersive behaviors like cognitive behavioral therapy, those might work for you. If you are more kind of in the middle side, then you have things like inpatient facilities that you can go and visit. You have support groups, you have wellness groups. A lot of people know those. A lot of people also know like the NA and AA group support groups as well. So that's kind of if you're kind of like in the middle trying to figure out what your best treatment is. If you're more on the lesser side, then yeah, you have, of course, your therapy, you have your counselors, you have your doctors that you can work with. So what people, if there's one thing I would like people for to know about recovery is there's not one way to do it. Everybody has their own path to recovery, and if AA groups work for you, then it works for you. If outpatient groups work for you, then it works for you. It's a matter of putting in the effort to figure out which path works for you and what's going to give you the best chance at recovery.
I want to dive into your experience with recovery and with prevention. I understand that you wrote your own harm reduction style curriculum when you were working in this field. Could you tell us what exactly is a harm reduction style curriculum and the background behind why you created it, and of course the content of your curriculum?
So all harm reduction really is a method used to lessen the harm if you're still using until you get to your point of recovery. So harm reduction is kind of like that middle ground between using and pure abstinence. And what harm reduction allows people to do is allows them to go through their recovery, kind of work themselves off of whatever they're recovering from in a way that allows them to have dignity and in a way that just allows them to work at their own pace. When I first came up with my harm reduction course, it was just a thought experiment, like it was really as simple as you have doctors and nurses to take care of their body. You have counselors and therapists to take care of their mind. Who's there to kind of take care of their spirit? Who's there to repair them as a person? Who's there to help them rebuild their confidence and make them feel, human again? And that's kind of that's what I focused on. So I came up with it's called the 8 gates of discovery, because if when you go through recovery, you're not recovering an old form of yourself. You're discovering a new version of who you are. So in each one of these gates is a very specific battle that you're going to go through in recovery. Whether that first one is just as simple as getting into it, choosing to decide to take recovery, for example, is one of the biggest battles you'll face. Another one of these battles that you face is accepting the new parts about you. A lot of people can get to recovery but have no clue what they're going to be at the end of it. So I just ask, let's say you get to recovery, my guy. What's next? Who are you? What do you do? Like, what are your hobbies? What are your habits? So it gave my clients time to be able to think of other things besides their drug use, besides fear and relapse. And it just made recovery fun. Like one of my favorite activities was you'd come into my group and it'd be a whole bunch of home and garden, like house magazines, things like that. And it'd be just a giant piece of cardboard paper. And I would say, yo, if money's no object, design your dream home. What would you have in it? What type of appliances would you have in there? What kind of carpets? What kind of chairs? And it was always funny watching the couples that would come into my group together because they had to each do a separate one. They couldn't actually do this as a married couple. So it was always funny watching them bicker back and forth as to, oh, you'd have that in your kitchen? Well, I would have this. Without realizing that for an hour, they haven't thought about their addiction. They haven't thought about being hungry. They haven't thought about being homeless. And that in itself is as much a part of recovery as anything else.
With this, with your mention of the 8 gates, I'm sure when you were constructing this, you put a lot of effort into it. You don't just sit down and write a bunch of 8 random gates. When it comes to these gates in particular and these battles and how you constructed it, what exactly led you to it? What mindset or philosophy were you using? And did you draw from your own history or past experience in any way?
It was all from my own experience. These were very specific battles that I faced within myself. And when I went through my recovery wasn't traditional. My recovery was in exile because I, like a lot of people, suffered the weight of stigma behind it. So that stigma and that fear is called what caused me to not get formal treatment. So these are things that I had to learn about myself and that I had to go through and that I had to face going through my own recovery. And I just kind of figured if I have some of these feelings, I'm pretty sure everybody else has fought similar battles and have gone through similar things as well. So it gave me a better chance to understand my clients better because we would talk about them and I would share my experience with them during that gate and they would be like, "Oh no, I felt the same way. Mine was just in a different path." And you start to see how people connect by it. And it was just the more people related to it, the more people understood, it made me understand just the world of recovery and how small and tight knit, but how much we all have in common.
Absolutely. Now, I'm wondering because, of course, Talk About It, this podcast is centered on opioids. Do you have any information on your work in opioids specifically? Is the recovery process from an opioid addiction unique when compared to others? And how do these 8 gates and your overall recovery philosophy play in when it comes to opioids specifically?
So it was actually the recovery process and the fear of relapse of opioids was what kind of first sparked this. I was talking to a lot of my clients and just getting to know them. And one of the things that I learned from them was they fear relapse. Probably more, I think, than any other addiction because not only of the weight of relapse, excuse me, the weight of stigma, but relapse in heroin is hard. It once you're on it long enough, it really does change your body chemistry to a point where it becomes an absolute dependent. And you will be sick. Like you will feel like you're throwing up your whole soul if you're going through withdrawal. And that in itself it's a fear for them that I think is it might if it's not I don't want to say it's different, but it's unique. Yes, that fear is what kind of keep is what makes opioids different. And that fear was one of the gates that I really wanted to speak the most about when I became a peer and once I first started teaching this was you cannot fear relapse because if you fear relapse, then you fear bad days. We're all going to have bad days. Like there's not a single person that goes through life perfectly. And especially those of us in recovery, our bad days seem to hit harder than anybody else. So teaching them to be okay with having a bad day and having wellness tools in place and having a support system in place helps mitigate that fear of that bad day. So now you have more buy-in to their recovery. And it was the human aspect of it was what I really wanted to focus on with my harm reduction course was how do I make this person feel like a person again? How do I make them feel like I can wake up in the mirror, wake up every day, look at myself in the mirror and know, yeah, I might have been through some bad stuff, but I'm still a good person and I'm still here. So I just tried to focus on things that would build up confidence, like using music and language and the power of wordplay, or even introducing my clients to the concept of your own radio, which are your thoughts, your own head. We all know, like if a song comes on that we don't like, we can change the channel. Same thing works with your mind as well. You can train yourself to have your mind tell you positive things about yourself and help push you in those spaces when you're having bad days.
I want to shift gears now and talk about your work as a peer. Obviously, you have a lot of experience with peer services, peer education, peer recovery, and I definitely want to dive into that. But before we do that, I want to focus on that word peer. Why is this peer-to-peer model so important? And what exactly is this peer-to-peer model?
So the peer-to-peer model, not to go fully technical on you, but it's based in trauma-informed care. And for those that don't know what trauma-informed care is, it's just the approach that everybody you meet has gone through something, whether they openly admit it and are comfortable with it, or whether they're not. It just gives you a platform to work on that maybe something might have happened with this person. As peers, we kind of take it to a different level and we use our experience. We use those times that we were in clinics or that we were homeless or when we were in active addiction. We take those experiences and use them to relate to our clients. We have the same end game as any doctor or any therapist that's out there. Our approach is what makes us unique because I'm going to approach you as a homie, as somebody who's been there, as somebody who knows what it's like to wear the same pair of socks. And I've been taught by my students that the opposite of addiction is connection. So being able to create that connection, being able to create that camaraderie and that support for that client, as a peer, we might be the only support system that they have at first. And that support is what's going to help push them on those days when they don't think they can make it. That support and that connection is what's going to be that motivation for them to fight through some of the darkest days that you're going to go through, and know that you have somebody at your side that has been there, has done that, and knows how to dig out of it. But I think my favorite part about being a peer is I'm not going to tell you how I did it. I'm going to teach you your strengths. I'm going to teach you help you find what you do best, and then teach you to use that to dig yourself out of it. So we really focus on getting to know that person, getting to know everything about them. So that way we can help them find their strengths and their tools to create their own recovery plan.
You have an extensive background in a host of peer avenues, such as peer services, peer education, peer recovery. Could you walk us through what each of those mean, as well as just a few points or some aspects you'd like to highlight about your experience in each of those roles?
So when I was in direct care and peer services, if there was one thing I would love for people to know, it is a camaraderie within this world that I didn't know existed, and I wish more people did. We all kind of relate to each other. And I remember when there was a huge drug scare in Seaford, and, the heroin was coming out really bad. And I remember watching my clients hold each other accountable for not using alone, making sure that they checked in on each other. They became their own support net. And I wish more people outside of that world understood that and saw that, because it really would change how people view us and how people view our world. Peer education, it's an honor. I get to train some of the most resilient, brilliant, and just amazing people that have come through the slums, people from all kinds of backgrounds, because there's no one way to be a peer. If I was to train you to be a peer, my guy, your peer work would be different than mine, because peer work in itself is individual. We're supposed to be different. My personality is going to ring out in a lot of my peer work, just like I teach my students to be themselves. Your experience you already have because you've been through it. What you're doing now is using your personality to bring the experience to that person. And then peer care is simply just being there to support somebody, man. Like, I don't want to say a friend, because we're a bit more than friends. But what you get from us is an undying support. And that in itself can move mountains in recovery once a person realizes that it's there and they accept it.
How does someone get involved in this peer work, whether they personally need help, if they have substance use disorder and needs a support buddy, or whether they want to become a peer educator or a peer service specialist themselves? How can someone get involved in this field?
Well, my first piece of advice, if you're thinking to get into peer work, do your research, do your homework. There are peers in many areas of behavioral and behavioral health and medical systems. I've trained peers that have worked with domestic violence survivors. I've trained peers that work in cancer wards. I've trained peers that work in halfway houses, and I've trained peers that work in, clinics. So what you want to do is find a population and a group of people that speaks to your heart and speaks to your soul that you want to work with. Our job is tough. I mean, you're dealing with people and some of their going through their worst days of their life every single day. And it's gonna weigh on you because you're human, and to be a peer is to be empathetic. You're gonna feel them. You're gonna feel that pain with them. So to try to make this job as easy as possible, definitely do the research on a group of people that you want to work with. The next step from that would be get in, whether you can either get in as a volunteer or get in as a paid peer, depending on what that facility needs. Once you're in, give it about 2 to 3 months to gain some experience, to learn to develop your wellness tools, to develop your support system. Once that happens, you can apply for the peer certification course that Mental Health Association runs. That is a very simple application process. We teach this course in 3 different platforms. We have 2 virtual courses and an in-person course that we do. We're currently working on a hybrid course now, but that might not drop till like 2026. Once you apply there, then the training is 50 hours. So we ask a lot out of our students and we push them. And we'll cover topics from ethics to cultural humility to self-care and wellness techniques, harm reduction. Like we try to cover the entire gamut of just different, different peer topics. Once that's done, you get through our course, then you apply for the certification test and pass the test. An 80% success rate with our students passing. So we do a pretty decent job, I think.
Definitely. One more aspect of this peer work that I want to touch on is your certification. You're a certified peer recovery specialist. I'm just curious, what exactly does the certification process entail? And once you have that certification, what doors are open for you in terms of opportunities?
Well, once you're certified, that basically kind of follows you everywhere you go. Now, if you want to move out of state, for example, you might have to check out what their certification process is and like how many of your hours and training will transfer over. But for the most part, if you've ever seen the show My Strange Addiction, whenever you see a therapist that has the CPRS letters behind their name, that's essentially what we are. So this can take you anywhere. And what's really, really awesome is now because there's such a big push for mental health services and more mental health agencies, you're starting to see peers pop up in sporting facilities, for example. I know the NHL just started a brand new mental health program in which they're having peers and therapists that are paid for by the team and they're part of their staff. So you're starting to see peers in those aspects. You can see them in colleges now helping out with students as they transition. What's really awesome is you can see peers, certified peers go into prisons and work with inmates. So the certification really does open up a ton of doors for you. It's just, again, a matter of getting in where you fit in best. And the certification process outside of our course, it's a test that you have to take. It's 75 questions. It's a proctored secured test. So it kind of is like, it's like taking your ACT or SAT all over again. It has that same kind of vibe to it. And once you pass the test, then you're certified for 2 years. In order to keep your license in certification, you have to get 20 hours of what's called continuing education units, which Mental Health Association provides those free of charge. We actually write our own courses for the CEUs, and they'll cover just a wide range of topics that peers will either face in their journey or different ethical concerns that we should make peers aware of.
You're also affiliated with the Mental Health Association. In fact, I believe your T-shirt that you're wearing right now is by the MHA. I'm just curious. I know, obviously, we can probably spend an entire episode on the connection between mental health and your work in this field. But when it comes to prevention, when it comes to recovery, as I would say, especially with opioids, what role does mental health play, and how has your work in the MHA assisted you in that role?
Oh man, mental health is huge in the world of opioids because chances are your addiction came from a traumatic experience. And I'd be willing to bet, a month's worth of Sundays on that because when you talk to people and the more you learn about them, you learn that the addiction itself is an end game to something that happened. So a lot of the times you can't work on the addiction part without focusing on the mental health aspect of it. Now, that also just doesn't mean trauma. Mental health could be strengthening your wellness tools. Like you guys see me with my drumsticks all the time. That's one of my biggest wellness tools because that helps keep me grounded. So making sure that your mental health is balanced in the world of recovery is what's going to increase your chances at success. And that was probably the biggest thing that I learned working for the Mental Health Association was how vitally important they are and also how diverse the world of addiction can be. I have a colleague that's a lawyer that struggles with suicide and depression. I have another colleague that battled a pill addiction, not because she had a terrible childhood, but because she had back surgery from playing sports. Had another colleague who battled alcohol addiction most of her life, also graduating from Princeton. So being able to be around so many different people with so many different backgrounds, all it did was just make me a better peer when I'm out in public and when I'm talking to people about this. But most importantly, just a better educator and a better support system for for my students and for my clients, my former clients that I still see every day.
Derrick, you've given us so much information on your work in recovery and in prevention, and with your help and with your work in recovery and especially with regards to opioids. I'd like to ask one final question. Drawing on all your past experience and especially what we talked about today, and seeing the state of the opioid epidemic and of substance abuse in general, in your personal opinion, what needs to be done to curb substance use, especially when it comes to opioids, and ensure that recovery and the process of recovering is as easy and effective as possible?
If there's one thing that I could change, it would simply for people to understand that everybody's one decision away from this world. Everybody. Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter what background you have, doesn't matter how much money you have. We're all one decision away or one bad day away from ending up right in this space. So if more people could understand that and more people could have empathy for those of us that are in this world, because I've met some really, truly amazing people that might have had a bad day or had a traumatic experience that broke them in so profoundly that the only escape they had was through drugs and alcohol. Doesn't mean that they're a bad person. And if I could help change what the stigma of this looks like and help change what the face of the recovery world is, then that's what I'm gonna do. Like that's why I love doing stuff like this, and because the world of recovery is me. The world of recovery are my students. The world of recovery is, that aunt that quietly battled alcoholism without telling anybody because she couldn't. That's our world, and we are way stronger, we are way more kind, and we are way more understanding than anybody really gives us credit for. Just take the time out to get to know us a little bit, and you'll see we have a lot more in common than what most people give us credit for.
Absolutely. Derrick, thank you so much for all the insight and knowledge that you provided with us today. For our viewers at home, that was Derrick Turner, a peer educator and a certified peer recovery specialist. My name is Jacob Don, and we'll see you next time on Talk About It.
Listen to Talk About It and other podcasts from The Cause on all major podcast platforms.